This is CBS 2 News at 4.
This afternoon, millions of Americans are fleeing. They're in the path of a hurricane that is substantial. We're talking about a storm that's being described as catastrophic, staggering, and life-threatening.
Hurricane Florence is expected to make landfall by the end of this week. And now this is a live look that you're seeing of South Carolina before the storm hits.
Yeah, it looks fairly calm there right now, but that is not going to be the case tomorrow at about this time. The National Hurricane Center has upgraded Florence to a Category 4 storm. A Category 4 storm meaning that it is potentially life-threatening.
And it could intensify even more as it passes over warmer waters. It could be the strongest storm to make an East Coast landfall since Hurricane Andrew in 1992.
4 states and Washington, D.C. have all declared states of emergency. 1 million people are under a mandatory evacuation order from Virginia down through the Carolinas, where Florence is expected to make landfall early Friday, and then it's going to stall.
Interstate lanes are now reversed to help people move out. And today, North Carolinians heard it straight from the governor. They have never seen a storm like Florence.
Even if you've ridden out storms before, this one is different. Don't bet your life on riding out a monster.
Those who haven't evacuated are stocking up, while business owners are hoping that sandbags and plywood will keep their property safe while they're gone.
The forecast for Hurricane Florence is changing by the hour. And now our chief meteorologist, Roland Stedham, has decades of experience forecasting hurricanes in the Atlantic.
He's live now at the National Weather Service in Boise to update us on the storm's path.
Brent and Abigail, being here at the National Weather Service office in Boise, Idaho, kind of takes me back to when I was in South Florida in Miami, and I would hang out at the National Hurricane Center for hours on end. The facility is very similar. The folks are working. Now, they're not necessarily directly tracking the hurricane, but indirectly, all eyes are on what this massive hurricane is doing. And with me right now is Jay Breidenbach, and he's the warning coordination meteorologist here at the National Weather Service in Boise. And Jay, when you look at this hurricane, and you guys have extremely high resolution satellite imagery, it's amazing. Tell us what we're looking at here as we look at the eye of Hurricane Florence.
Well, Roland, this is our brand new geostationary satellite, and we're looking at extremely high resolution imagery of the center of the storm. This is the eye of the hurricane right here.
And it's getting a new image every 30 seconds.
Every 30 seconds. And so this is we're seeing details in the eye of the storm that we've never seen before with hurricanes, including, and you and I were talking about this earlier, these little whirls within the eye itself, mesoscale vortices.
Yeah, those are little rotational vortices within the actual main vortice of the hurricane itself. Now, folks, the actual eye of the hurricane, when you look at this hurricane, the 140-mile-an-hour winds does not expand across the entire spectrum of the hurricane. The core of the strongest winds are located with the actual eye wall of the storm itself, Jay, and that is located right about there. Stretches out how far from the center?
Oh, about 20 miles. It's like a donut, going almost all the way around the calm center.
Yep. That's why where the eye goes is extremely important. But a hurricane making landfall, again, is a very wide swath of destruction. But the core of the most damaging winds are actually associated with the actual eye wall itself. I believe I got some graphics I'd like to go ahead and put up for you very quickly, because I want to show you, number one, where the hurricane is going. Number two, what's steering the system. And what's steering the storm right now is a very strong area of high pressure. And that high pressure ridge that's sitting on top of Hurricane Florence is the driving force, and that is what is pushing the hurricane in a general westerly direction. Also, the eye of the hurricane is protecting the hurricane from any adverse winds right now that could be bumping into it and causing it to weaken and fall apart. That's one of the concerns associated with this storm, is that the environment is so conducive for intensification, and the winds are actually expected to hit about 140 miles per hour. And as we've mentioned before, once the hurricane makes landfall, it is expected to stall. So this could be very similar to a Hurricane Harvey, because Harvey was not a hurricane once it stalled. It was a tropical storm. But when you have a tropical system like this and it becomes stationary over landmass, especially over landmass that has rugged terrain, it has a tendency of causing very significant issues. And that issue would be long after the storm surge has moved on through, long after the winds have died down, then you have the potential for significant flooding. And we're talking about, have you seen any numbers, Jay, about what they're projecting as far as rainfall is concerned out there in the Carolinas?
Some of the areas inland in the Carolinas, 20 to 30 inches of rain looks possible with this storm after landfall.
After landfall, and who knows how long it's going to stick around. So
it's going to be slow moving.
It's going to be very slow moving, and a stalled tropical system over landmass, that you can see much more damage inland and much more potential for loss of life just because of the flooding with a system that makes landfall. So it's certainly something that's going to be getting a lot of folks' attention in the days to come. We'll have much more on our local forecast as well coming up in just a few minutes from the National Weather Service. Roland Stedham, CBS 2 News.
Now, with the strength of Hurricane Florence, it's expected to become the most destructive hurricane to hit this far north on the East Coast since 1954. Here's a look at Hurricane Hazel. It made landfall at Myrtle Beach, South Carolina, and then it moved along the U.S. coast to North Carolina and Virginia. Though coastal towns suffered the worst damage, even cities far from the ocean were affected. In Raleigh, North Carolina, winds were recorded at 100 miles per hour.
Now let's talk about what's happening elsewhere in this country to help those people in the path of this hurricane. Crews from as far west as California are on their way east, headed for the storm. Los Angeles County is sending 16 members of its urban search and rescue team. They're going to Bowling Green, Virginia, and another 16 members of their swiftwater rescue team are headed to Raleigh, North Carolina. Orange County, California is sending swiftwater rescuers and equipment to Virginia. Meanwhile, the Navy is getting its ships and personnel out of harm's way. U.S. Fleet Forces Command ordered all ships at Norfolk to head to sea. That order covers nearly 30 ships. They're steaming out into the Atlantic and away from the hurricane's path.
Several major airlines are offering a change fee waiver for travelers impacted by Hurricane Florence. Delta, American, United, and Southwest are among the airlines that will waive change fees or fare differences. The waivers for Hurricane Florence covered 23 airports. As for flights here out of Boise, a spokesman says things should be business as usual since there are no direct flights going to that area. However, it's a good idea to check your flight status before heading to the airport. Now, people in the projected path of Florence can only do so much. The other pivotal work is done in Washington. Coming up at 4:30, we'll take you to a look at how the federal emergency services are preparing for the potential devastation.